Anna moved through the cafe with practiced ease, her hands steady as she poured steaming coffee into cups that would soon warm tired hands and sleepy eyes. She smiled at the sailors who came in early and joked with the officers who lingered just long enough to grab their caffeine before disappearing into the corridors of the base. Her apron felt heavy across her chest, as if it carried the weight of her life that she had carefully hidden from everyone she had learned long ago that ordinary. Appearances were the best disguise, and she had perfected the art of blending in like smoke through the cracks of reality. No one questioned her. No one noticed the way her eyes scanned the room, constantly calculating, measuring, observing, as though she could see things that others could not. The clink of spoons against ceramic cups was a rhythm she had memorized, a sound that reminded her of order and control in a world that had once been chaotic and violent. She wiped down the counter again, though it was already spotless, letting her fingers linger over the worn wood that held years of memories. She never spoke of the people who had been lost, the missions that had gone wrong, the nights when she had been the only one standing between failure and catastrophe. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and breathed in the aroma of roasted coffee beans, pretending it was enough to ground her, pretending that this was all that mattered. Yet her mind was 1,000 miles away, remembering faces she had seen in places she was not allowed to speak of, faces that could appear at any moment to remind her that her past had never truly let go. The bell above the door jingled, and Anna looked up instinctively. Her heart skipped a beat, though. She tried to calm it. It was only the sound of the door opening and closing. She told herself it was normal. The base was always busy at this hour, but then she saw him, the tall figure in uniform who walked with a confidence that demanded attention, the kind of presence that made people stop in their tracks, and she felt something inside her shift, a warning deep and primal, a signal she had not felt in years. The Admiral was coming toward her, and the air in the cafe seemed to thicken as though time itself had slowed to watch their encounter. He spoke her name, and it slipped past his lips like a secret. She had never wanted to be spoken aloud. The sound of it made her stomach tighten, and her hands tremble slightly as if the ground had shifted beneath her feet. Her co-workers looked at her with curiosity and confusion. They did not know what the Admiral was saying. They did not understand the history behind the words or the way they struck her like a lightning bolt in the middle of a calm sea. She kept her expression neutral, though inside she felt the flood of memories crashing against the walls she had built for herself. The missions overseas, the nights spent in foreign cities where shadows were friends and enemies alike, the codes she had cracked, the lives she had saved, and the ones she had been powerless to protect. All of it rushed back in fragments of light and dark, and she had to breathe deeply to keep from giving herself away. She forced a smile and continued to hand out the coffee as if nothing had happened, though the tremor in her fingers betrayed her calm appearance. She noticed a man in a corner of the cafe who lingered too long, watching her, not looking at the cups he held, not noticing the coffee in front of him, only observing her as though trying to measure the distance between the woman she was now and the person she had been. Then she felt a cold prickling on the back of her neck, a familiar feeling that warned of danger and intrigue, and she wondered if he was here by coincidence, or if he had been sent to test her. The thought made her pulse quicken, and she forced herself to steady her breathing, counting the seconds silently in her mind, each tick like a drumbeat reminding her that she could not let her guard down even for a moment. The Admiral moved closer, his gaze never leaving hers, and she could see in his eyes the recognition, the understanding of what she had done and what she had left behind. The memories they shared were invisible to everyone else, yet palpable to her like a phantom hand pressing on her shoulder. The cafe around them faded into a blur of movement and sound, as though she were seeing it all through a veil that separated the ordinary from the extraordinary. She handed him a cup of black coffee, her hands steady now, though her heart still raced, and she spoke a casual greeting, though every word felt heavy with meaning. The words were ordinary, but the silence between them was filled with weight and history that no one else could understand. A sudden noise from the kitchen made her start, and she turned slightly to see a tray wobble on the edge of the counter. A young sailor reached for it just in time, and she smiled briefly at his clumsiness. But her mind was elsewhere, calculating the implications of the Admiral's presence here. Why now? Why in front of everyone? Why did he speak her name in a voice that carried both warning and admiration? The questions piled up in her mind faster than she could answer them, and she felt the old instincts stirring the need to act, to protect, to conceal, to prepare for whatever was coming next. The familiarity of the adrenaline was almost comforting, yet it reminded her how far she had come from those days when every decision meant life or death, and she wondered if she had truly escaped, or if the past had merely been waiting patiently for this moment to arrive. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, and she ignored it at first, knowing that some calls had to be resisted, but the vibration was insistent, and she felt a cold realization that someone was watching her. Someone knew where she was and what she was doing, and that it was no longer a private space, no longer a sanctuary. The cafe was a stage, and she had been forced into a scene she could not rehearse. She felt the weight of eyes unseen and the pressure of anticipation pressing down like a physical force. She kept her movements smooth and calm, giving the impression of normalcy, while internally she was already strategizing, planning, calculating every possible outcome and escape route. The clock on the wall ticked loudly in her ears, each second a reminder that time was running out, even in this ordinary place, where coffee cups clinked and conversation hummed. She felt the pull of history and duty and danger converging around her, and she knew that everything could change in an instant. A single word, a glance, a misstep could unravel her carefully constructed life, and she had to decide whether to fight, conceal, or run, and in the back of her mind a small voice whispered that the Admiral was not here by accident, that the universe or something darker had conspired to bring her past and present together in this small moment, and she had no choice but to face it. The door opened again, and a gust of wind swept through the cafe, carrying with it the scent of the outside world, a reminder that the outside world was vast and dangerous, and that it had eyes that were always watching. She turned instinctively toward the sound and saw shadows moving on the threshold, and her heart skipped a beat. Though she tried to appear composed, she knew that this was only the beginning, and that the ordinary morning she had imagined would never be ordinary again, and as she took a step toward the counter to greet another customer, she felt the unmistakable pull of destiny, the tension coiling around her like a spring ready to release. And she realized that every decision she made in the next few moments could change everything. Her eyes flicked back to the Admiral, who now held his coffee calmly as if nothing were happening. Yet the air between them crackled with unspoken words and unshared history. She forced herself to focus on the mundane tasks, the refilling of sugar bowls, the wiping of tables, the small gestures that kept her camouflage intact, while the storm of the past and future raged invisibly around her. She noticed the way a small scar above his eyebrow caught the morning light, a memory she had tried to erase resurfacing in an instant, and she felt the pull of recognition mixed with dread that what had been hidden for so long was now on the verge of revelation, and she could not stop it, even if she tried. And in that moment, as she poured another cup of coffee and smiled at a passing sailor, she felt the world tilt and knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The Admiral sipped his coffee slowly, as if savoring the moment, letting the silence stretch between them longer than it should have been. Anna kept her hands steady on the counter, her eyes locked on his, unable to look away, yet unwilling to reveal too much. The air around them was thick with unspoken recognition and memories that belonged to no one else in the cafe. Yet it weighed on her like a physical presence, each heartbeat echoing in her ears, reminding her that everything could change in the blink of an eye. She tried to smile casually at a passing sailor offering a friendly word, but her mind was racing with calculations and possibilities. Every glance from the Admiral was a signal, every small movement, a message encoded in years of shared history. She felt herself caught between who she was now and who she had been. A tension that made the skin on her neck prickle and the hair on her arms rise. Placed the coffee cup down on the counter with a deliberate slowness that drew her attention, and she saw the faintest trace of a smirk, as if he knew exactly what she was thinking, and she realized that he did the memories, the missions, the lives she had led in secret. None of it was hidden from him, and the knowledge made her stomach twist with both fear and relief. She wanted to speak, but no words came out, and the buzzing of her phone in her pocket reminded her that the world beyond the cafe was not waiting patiently for her to catch up. Someone was already watching. Someone had already started to move pieces in the game that she had thought she had left behind, and she felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that always preceded a confrontation, a surge of energy that made her feel alive and terrified at the same time. A young officer stumbled past, carrying a tray of pastries, and Anna nearly lost her composure. Her mind instantly calculating the potential threat if the Admiral moved or spoke the wrong word, if the officer glanced the wrong way, if someone noticed too much, and she forced herself to breathe, to steady her nerves, to remind herself that she was still in control. Though every instinct screamed that control was an illusion, that the past was clawing at her. From the shadows, she remembered nights in foreign cities where every stranger could have been an enemy, every friendly face a threat, every sound a signal, and she felt that same intensity returning now in the fluorescent light and the chatter of the cafe, the ordinary world overlaying the extraordinary reality that surrounded her. The Admiral leaned closer, his voice a low murmur that brushed against her ear and sent a shiver down her spine. He spoke a single sentence, and though it sounded casual, it carried the weight of all they had endured together. The words hinted at missions she had thought long buried, and dangers she had believed were behind her. He watched her reaction, carefully measuring every flicker of expression, and she realized that she could not hide from him. She had no choice but to respond with subtlety, to navigate this dangerous terrain with precision. And yet she could feel the magnetic pull of the past, drawing her in the memories of late nights, filled with coded messages, the exhilaration of impossible. Escapes the fear and exhilaration of life on the edge, all of it surged forward, threatening to expose her to everyone in the room. She felt a cold sweat break out on the back of her neck, and her fingers tightened around the edge of the counter as if it could anchor her to the present and keep her from being swept away by the tidal wave of history. And she noticed the way some of the patrons had begun to look at them curiously, their whispered conversations a faint hum in the background. Of her awareness, she knew that any moment someone could ask a question that she could not answer without revealing everything, and the thought made her stomach knot and her mind race with contingency plans and escape routes and what-ifs that spiraled endlessly through her imagination. She forced a calm smile onto her face and offered the Admiral a casual comment about the weather, hoping it was enough to mask the storm inside her. Then a shadow moved near the doorway, a man standing just out of reach watching the exchange with intensity. Anna felt her chest tighten, recognizing the presence even before fully seeing the face. Her instincts screamed danger, and she knew that this was no accident. Someone had followed her. Someone knew the Admiral would be here. Someone had engineered this meeting, and she had no idea if it was friend or foe. And the thought made her pulse race in a way that reminded her of past missions, the kind where a single wrong step meant death, and yet she could not leave. She had to stay anchored in the ordinary facade while preparing for extraordinary consequences, the duality of her life stretching taut like a wire over a chasm. Her phone buzzed again, insistent and urgent, and she resisted the urge to check. It knowing that some messages had to be ignored until she could assess the situation fully. She noticed the faintest twitch of the Admiral's eye, and she realized that he had noticed the same shadow. She had the same potential threat lurking just beyond her control, and the tension coiled around her chest, making it hard to breathe, yet sharpening her awareness to a razor's edge. She mentally ran through all possible scenarios, imagining confrontations in the cafe and the parking lot on the base, imagining every contingency and counter-contingency, and realizing that her calm exterior was the only thing standing between the chaos and the ordinary patrons who knew nothing of the worlds colliding around them. The wind shifted as the door opened again, a gust carrying the scent of gasoline and salt air from the nearby docks. She felt it hit her like a warning that the outside world was encroaching, that the safe, ordinary life she had tried to build was a fragile illusion, and that someone was testing her patience, her skill, her ability to navigate danger without exposing herself. The Admiral's voice cut through her thoughts softly but firmly, a reminder that history was not behind them, that secrets were alive and moving, and that she had to be ready for whatever would come next. And she felt her hands shake slightly as she set down another cup of coffee, knowing that every second counted, and that the ordinary rhythm of the cafe could be shattered in an instant. She caught a glimpse of the young sailor who had almost dropped the tray earlier, watching her with wide eyes filled with curiosity and confusion. And she realized that her performance had to be perfect, that the ordinary life she projected had to be flawless, that even a flicker of recognition could trigger questions and investigations. She reminded herself to smile, nod, greet, answer, and yet every motion carried the tension of someone who had survived impossible odds and who knew that survival depended on vigilance and precision. And she felt the familiar thrill of being alive mixed with the weight of responsibility heavy on her shoulders. The Admiral shifted slightly, his hand brushing the edge of the counter as if to remind her of the connection they shared. And she knew that he had chosen this moment to test her, to remind her that the past was never far away, that someone was always watching, that the ordinary world could never fully contain the extraordinary. And she felt a cold certainty that whatever decision she made next would define the path ahead, that her ordinary morning had ended. The world she knew had changed, and that there was no turning back. She inhaled deeply, steeling herself for whatever was about to unfold, and she knew that the cafe that had once been her sanctuary was now a stage for a drama she could not avoid, and that the next move could change everything forever. Anna felt her pulse hammering in her ears as the shadow at the doorway shifted, ever so slightly, making her heart race and her mind calculate the danger that could be lurking just out of sight. She kept her hands steady on the counter, pretending to serve coffee with calm efficiency, while every muscle in her body was coiled. Like a spring ready to react if needed, the Admiral's gaze never left her, and she knew that he understood the tension that crackled in the air. The quiet hum of the cafe seemed distant and unreal, replaced by the sharp awareness of every movement, every whisper, every glance that might betray her hidden identity. A sudden cough from a patron made her flinch, and she turned toward the sound just long enough to see the man near the door slip into the shadows of the corridor beyond her vision. And she knew instantly that this was no random observer. Someone had come to test her patience, someone who had been tracking her, and the thought made her stomach churn with both fear and anticipation. She felt the old instincts stir, the ones that had kept her alive in places where no one could have survived, and she realized that she could not ignore them. The ordinary world had fractured, and she was already stepping back into a life she had tried to leave behind. Her phone vibrated again, in her pocket, and she ignored it, fighting the urge to look at the screen, knowing that each message could be a warning or a trap. The Admiral took a step closer, his eyes scanning the cafe as if to measure the environment, and Anna understood that she was being observed from multiple angles. Her training and her secrets were exposed in plain sight, and the tension tightened around her chest. She forced herself to smile and pour another cup, knowing that the next moment could change everything, forever, and that the ordinary facade she wore might shatter in an instant, leaving her vulnerable to the dangers lurking unseen in the corners of her world. The door opened once more, and a gust of wind swept through the cafe carrying the scent of rain and something metallic that made Anna's stomach tighten. She felt the hairs on her arms rise as the shadowy figure emerged from the corner of her vision, and she realized that the moment she had been preparing for had arrived. The Admiral's eyes narrowed slightly, and she sensed the silent communication between them. A warning and a challenge intertwined. She kept her hands steady on the counter, her mind racing through every possible contingency, every escape route, every move she could make to protect herself and the secrets she had carried for so long. Her phone buzzed insistently in her pocket, a final message that she dared not read yet. The urgency of it pressed against her chest like a physical force. She knew that her ordinary life had ended in the instant the Admiral had spoken her name, and that the ordinary cafe had become a battlefield where shadows moved unseen and danger waited in the hum of the fluorescent lights. She poured the coffee, she handed it to the officer. Passing by, her eyes flicked to the door again, and she knew that the next second could determine everything, and that no one would ever look at her the same way again, as the storm of her past collided with the fragile present. She braced herself for whatever came next, knowing that nothing would ever be ordinary again.